Hi there! For this first video Acadesign produced in partnership with Letraset, we have decided to give you some tips for the coloring challenge of Letraset devised with Mel Elliot on the basis of the latest Ford Capri. First of all, the layout not being to my style, I decided to redo it as in automotive illustrations. A small tip to recognize the back of a bulletproof sheet. Like I did, touch a little ink with the finger on the bulletproof back, since we cannot use markers on it. You will notice immediately the ink does not adhere to the sheet and spreads out. To begin with the layout, for the elliptical shape of the wheels, the shape can be improved. The most important thing is to visualize the line without touching the sheet and then to draw the ellipse a little at a time. Also, for the rest of the layout of the car, avoid making small strokes like a lot of beginners do. As can be seen in the video, it is better to visualize the line without actually marking the sheet, and then draw a clean line. It's important to reinforce the lines in the foreground. In order to create an atmospheric perspective, reinforce the natural perspective and the evasive lines. For the color, we will use bottled ink and cotton wool. Generally, it's better to use a demakeup split in half. As you can see in the video, it doesn't look too good. But it's not a problem, we can fix it. With natural grey, I draw in the shadow, then quickly with markers begin to reinforce the principal lines and sharpness. I begin to shade a little. It's really easy with few triers or pro markers. The advantage with triers is a brush nib that is really soft, making it easy to pass from light to broad lines. Now I'm drawing first reflections. It's really very basic coloring. So as we can see, you can darken a color by two ways with markers. Now I am using a warm gray, it fools the red. If we take its complementary color, that is green, that have obviously to be soft, it does as well, even better, and it gives a brighter color. More clean and finally more interesting. I insist on the fact you have to use a soft green. Otherwise you will fail to see your green darkened by the red. Make a test on another sheet of paper. So let's continue and shade in the wings mirror shadow, for example. It creates initial contrast. For the lights, I placed few glints with a black marker. For the car shadow with a ram gray, we can already begin to darken it. But it doesn't look so good, so I saturate the sheet with a ram gray. By adding a little bit of black to it, I can use my ram gray like a blender. It allows me to create first gradations with markers. Now we can really see a true pool of ink on the sheet. Just be careful to do not pierce your sheet. So far so good. It's already beginning to look neater, and as we give more contrast in the foreground than in the background to enhance perspective with more detailing on the front to draw attention. I'm reinforcing the reflection even though I don't know this car very well. It's still very rough, so we can reinforce the waistline on wheel edges with a black pencil, for example a polychromos from Faber-Castell. It's important to keep the pencil sharp and nothing stops you trying different browns. Now I'm reinforcing the waistline. The advantage of testing different brands of pencil is to find the brand you like best and when to use it. Ideally, you should have 3 pencils, one hard, one medium, and one soft. Depending on the paper and whether it is saturated or not, your pencil will make a greater or lesser impression. With a small opaque white pen, you can add a few details here in this radiator grille. You can also do the same with the front lights, thus creating a 3D effect on the edges, like for example the windscreen wipers on the door surrounds. With a small Posca with a fine or medium nib, you can accentuate the brightness. Now look at the bonnet. The advantage of a Posca is that it gives you a fairly thick white line that it always works very well, whereas a white pen is sometimes not up to it. A few small brush strokes on the wheel arches, the wheel lines, and the tires, plus a few others here and there to reinforce the color contrast. The badge form. The interior with the Tria neutral grey. The base is sapphire, that's okay. With a big crystal, a few lines can be accentuated, such as the outlines of the door, the bonnet, and each body element. There are still few alterations to improve the rendering. In brief, working correctly, the car already begins to come alive. The rear tire didn't show up well enough, so, with only a few brush strokes, we can easily make out the whole wheel in a more dynamic way. It's really fast work and easy with simple skills. We don't have to be too concerned about how to place each reflections or shadow. And in less than half an hour, we already can get something pretty good, which is nice to look at. Now we can consider a second method. This second drawing we will use markers in more classical way. We will mention more in detail on how to use the blender. Quickly I'll trace the Capri with the sketcher to give it a nicer and more dynamic look, more suitable for car illustration than craft. First, lay in the most important reflection line, the waistline. This is a very important element in a car. To do so, you can be guided by studious photographs, but now I use my feeling and put the emphasis on the foreground, bringing out the front of the car and creating an atmospheric perspective. Then we get simple red tint areas with the 4 only shades of red, few tweaks and gestures. Lifting a little bit your marker, you can get, like on the seal, very soft gradations of red to white. Then we can draw the car's shadow with markers, keeping it simple with the tire always accentuating the foreground. With a few brush strokes you can darken, but to gain time we'll use a black marker and happily it syncs with a grey marker. It's there that we see the purpose of a blender marker, which, having a natural ink, enables you to easily spread another marker's ink or mix two, because the sheet is now impregnated. Consequently, it's in the blender's solvent that the inks can become mixed. You can spread them with your blender, mix them, thus obtaining better shades, nicer, more diffuse and natural in comparison with curved areas, as on the door where they are very clear-cut. Your drawings can be made to look more attractive with certain features being highlighted, so I darken few shades and reinforce the contrast. the very shiny areas where lights are darkened a little. These are micro contrast. So now I have my blader and a tria also available from ProMarker or Neighbor. I take my hand. We can begin to draw some reflections, for example on the door where I begin already with the blender. To dampen the sheet, a few marker strokes are enough. I saturate the sheet and get a real pool of ink in which I lay the few red marker strokes. It's already beginning to spread itself in the blender's ink, but to get more red in, I can come back with my blender and spread. Before it is dry, I again put in the red strokes on using the blender quickly, then working in the moist paper, a little bit like in watercolor. You can get elusive shades nicer in comparison with the very clear-cut reflections above that reinforce the waistline. In that manner, I will draw the bonnet and the whole rear of the car only using my blender. In few areas, I saturated with red and took some of my blender to get the pinkish color. A blender can take the color you give it. The pinkish color effectively reinforces the waistline perspective. To clean it, use another sheet of layout or bleed-proof paper so as not to dirty your drawing and use up your blender too quickly. The best is to have a blender by color range and, if possible, a bottled blender's ink. To tank up each blender from time to time because we'll use it faster than any other marker. Doing in this way you will keep your blenders a very long time. We are about to reach the end of the recording, but as you can see on the draw, the reflections are really different. One is very clear cut in comparison with others which are much more shaded, even if we could do better like on the bonnet where it's softer.